Hello, my dear listener, and welcome to a place where stories come alive and English learns itself. This is WooEnglish, your secret garden of words, your magic carpet to fluency. And today, oh today, we have a story that will make your heart race while your English grows. Picture this: a spy plane gliding silently over Cuba, grainy photographs that hide a terrifying secret, and two world leaders playing the most dangerous game of chess ever played, with nuclear weapons as their pieces. This isn't just history. This is the Cuban Missile Crisis as you've never heard it before. Every word designed to sharpen your English, every scene crafted to pull you deeper into the drama, every pause, every whisper, helping the language flow into your mind like never before. So find a cozy spot, put on your headphones, and let your English grow while the world holds its breath. Ready? Then let's begin. Chapter 1: The Spy in the Sky. October 14th, 1962. A crisp autumn morning. High above the Caribbean, an American U-2 spy plane sliced through thin, cold air. Its pilot, Major Richard Heiser, breathed steadily inside his pressurized suit. Just another routine mission. Or so he thought. Click, click, click. The plane's powerful camera snapped photos every few seconds. Click. Palm trees. Click. A quiet village. Click. Then, something that didn't belong. Long, canvas-covered shapes, arranged in perfect lines. Military trucks. Fuel tanks. And were those launch pads? The photos that changed history. Later that day, in a dark CIA lab in Washington, analysts hunched over the grainy black and white images. "My God," one whispered. His finger trembled as it traced the outline on the photo. There, hidden beneath Cuban palm trees. Soviet SS-4 nuclear missiles. Range: 1,300 miles, enough to hit Washington, New York, Chicago, with just 5 minutes warning. The knock on the door. It was late when McGeorge Bundy, Kennedy's national security advisor, got the call. "Sir, you need to see this, now." In the White House map room, the photos lay spread out like pieces of a terrible puzzle. Bundy's face went pale. "Does the president know?" The analyst shook his head. "Not yet." The president wakes up. 7 a.m. The sun rose over Washington. Kennedy was shaving when Bundy walked in. No hello, no small talk. Just 8 words that would change everything. "Mr. President, there are nuclear missiles in Cuba." The razor froze mid-stroke. For a long moment, silence. Then Kennedy said quietly, "We need to meet. Now." The world still sleeps. Outside, Washington went about its Sunday morning. Children played in yards. Couples read newspapers. No one knew that while they drank their coffee, the countdown to Armageddon had begun. And so it began. Not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a camera. The world was one step closer to the edge and didn't even know it. Chapter 2. The President's Burden. Washington, D.C., October 16th, 1962. The Oval Office was quiet, too quiet. The heavy curtains were drawn. A cool October breeze rattled the windows. At the great wooden desk sat John F. Kennedy, the President of the United States. His fingers tapped the surface, slow, steady, thoughtful. Across from him, his advisers waited. The air was thick with unease. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, finally, the director of the CIA took a breath and said it. Mr. President, we have photographic proof. Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. Silence. Kennedy's expression did not change. His blue eyes stayed locked on the man before him. How many? His voice was calm, measured. The reply came quickly. At least a dozen, maybe more. Some of them are already operational. Kennedy exhaled. Slowly. His jaw tightened. This was it. The nightmare they had all feared. The Soviet Union had placed nuclear weapons just 90 miles from American soil, close enough to reach Washington, New York, every major city in the eastern United States, in minutes. The world had changed. Kennedy leaned back, his mind racing. He glanced at the men around him, his brother, Robert, the Secretary of Defense, the generals, the intelligence officers, the political advisors. Each one had an opinion. Each one had a plan. A general spoke first. His voice was hard, cold. We have to strike. Now. A full air attack on the missile sites. Take them out before they're ready to launch. Kennedy shook his head. An airstrike on Cuba means war with the Soviet Union. Maybe, the general admitted, but if we wait, Mr. President, we risk losing millions of American lives. A long pause. Then, Robert Kennedy, Bobby, spoke. There's another way, he said. A blockade. The room stirred. Some whispered. Some frowned. A blockade? The Secretary of State questioned. What good is that? We surround Cuba with our navy, Bobby explained. Stop any Soviet ships from bringing more missiles. We show them we won't back down, but we don't fire the first shot. More whispers. More tension. The president rubbed his chin, thinking. An airstrike could mean war. A blockade could mean a long, dangerous standoff. And if they did nothing? Number. That was impossible. The fate of the world was in his hands. He stood, pacing slowly across the room. He ran a hand through his hair. Then, turning back to his advisers, he made his choice. We go with the blockade, he said. Then, with a deep breath, he added, and I will tell the world. Chapter 3. The world holds its breath. October 22nd, 1962. Evening. Across America, across the world, families sat frozen in front of their television screens. Radios crackled in living rooms, in kitchens, in bars and diners. People held their breath, And then, there he was, President John F. Kennedy. He sat at his desk in the Oval Office, his face pale but firm, his hands resting on a stack of papers. The cameras rolled. The world was listening. His voice, calm, steady, filled every home. "Good evening, my fellow citizens." A pause. "This government has discovered that the Soviet Union has placed nuclear missiles in Cuba." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Gasps, murmurs, the sound of a glass shattering in someone's kitchen. Kennedy continued, "These missiles are capable of striking North America in a matter of minutes. They are an undeniable threat to the safety of the United States and to peace in the Western Hemisphere." The world seemed to stop. People glanced at their children, at their spouses. Was this it? Was war coming? Kennedy's voice grew stronger. "We will not accept this threat." A breath. "Therefore, I have ordered a naval blockade of Cuba. No Soviet ship carrying weapons of war will be allowed to pass." A blockade. Not war, but something dangerously close. The streets of America were silent. The bars, usually full of laughter, were hushed. In Moscow, in Havana, in London, leaders stared at their screens, their faces hard as stone. What would the Soviets do? Would Khrushchev step back? Or would he push forward? The world waited. The next move belonged to Moscow. Chapter 4. The Ships That Would Decide Fate. The ocean was calm, too calm. Somewhere in the Atlantic, a Soviet cargo ship cut through the water. Its name? The Alexandrovsk, and hidden in its dark, damp hold, missiles, nuclear missiles. The ship moved steadily, silently, toward Cuba. But waiting just over the horizon was the U.S. Navy. Warships, their guns ready. Submarines lurking beneath the waves. Fighter planes screaming through the sky. One order, one mistake, and the world would burn. Stop them at any cost. President Kennedy had given the command. No Soviet ship reaches Cuba. The U.S. Navy formed a blockade, a wall of steel in the ocean. Their mission? Stop, inspect, and if necessary, turn back every Soviet vessel. But what if the Soviets refused? What if they called America's bluff? The rules of engagement were clear. If a ship ignores warnings, you fire. But a single shot could start World War III. They're not stopping. On October 24th, 1962, the moment arrived. A Soviet tanker, the Bucharest, approached the blockade. American warships locked onto it. Radars beeped. Guns turned. A voice crackled over the radio. "Stop your engines. Prepare for inspection." Silence. Then, the Bucharest slowed, but did not stop. Aboard the USS Coney, Captain William Ecker gripped the radio. "Do we fire, sir?" a young officer asked. Ecker hesitated. One word, and history changes forever. The world holds its breath. In Moscow, Khrushchev waited. In Washington, Kennedy stared at the maps. In homes across America, families huddled around radios. Would there be war? Then, a miracle. The Bucharest stopped. And then, it turned around. The first Soviet ship had backed down. But the crisis wasn't over. Another ship was coming. A bigger one. A dangerous one. The Grozny, carrying nuclear warheads. And this time, the Soviets might not retreat. This is the moment. October 25th. The Grozny steamed forward. American warships moved to intercept. Fighter jets roared overhead. The radio blared again. Stop, or be boarded. No response. The Grozny kept coming. Closer, closer. Then, a message from Moscow. A secret order. The Grozny stopped and turned away. The edge of the abyss. For 3 days, the world had balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one panicked captain, one misunderstood signal, and millions would have died. But in that moment, cool heads had won. The Soviets had blinked. The blockade held. But the crisis was far from over, because in Cuba, the missiles were still there, and time was running out. What would you have done? Would you have fired or waited? In those tense hours, the fate of the world rested not on grand speeches, but on the choices of ordinary men. Men who stared into the darkness and chose, just in time, to step back. Chapter 5. Fear in the Streets. October 27th, 1962. The most dangerous day in history. In Washington, New York, London, Moscow, the world held its breath. Because in Cuba, Soviet fingers hovered over nuclear buttons, and in America, missile crews stood ready to fire back. One order, one mistake, and the sky would burn. They're coming. In schools, children practiced duck and cover. Teachers smiled, but their hands shook. If you see a bright flash, hide under your desks. But deep down, everyone knew no desk would save them. Shelters and goodbyes. In backyards, men built bunkers. Hammers pounded. Wood creaked. Wives watched in silence. Will it be enough? They whispered. No one answered. In churches, people prayed. Some cried. Others just stared. Because how do you pray when the end might be tomorrow? The soldiers who waited. On a quiet airbase in Florida, a young pilot sat in his jet. His mission? If the alarm sounds, you take off. You fly to Cuba. You drop your bomb. He looked at the photo taped to his cockpit. His wife, his baby girl. Will I see them again? No one knew. Moscow, the other side of fear. Across the world, in Russia, the same fear. A Soviet officer stood in a dark control room. His hand hovered over a red button. His orders were clear. If the Americans attack, you strike first. He thought of his home, his family asleep in their beds. Will I kill millions to save my own? The clock ticked. The world stops. In New York, traffic jammed as people fled the city. In London, radios played nothing but emergency broadcasts. In Moscow, long lines formed at food stores. Everyone knew, if the bombs fell today, no one would need groceries tomorrow. A phone call that changed everything. Then, at the White House, a phone rang. Kennedy picked it up. A voice crackled through, "Khrushchev wants to talk." A secret deal? A way out? For the first time in days, hope. But outside, the world still waited. Still prayed. Still stared at the sky. That night, millions of parents tucked their children into bed and wondered, will the sun rise tomorrow? No one knew. And that was the true terror of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Chapter 6. The Secret Messages. October 26th, 1962. The world stood at the edge, but in the shadows, a desperate game was being played. Not with weapons, not with threats, but with words, secret words. The first letter. In Moscow, Nikita Khrushchev sat alone in his office. His face was tired, his hands unsteady. For days he had bluffed, threatened, pushed the world toward war. But now, he hesitated. What have I done? With a deep breath, he picked up his pen and began to write. A letter to John F. Kennedy. Not as an enemy, but as a man who finally understood. If we do not stop now, the world will burn. A strange delivery. In Washington, a young aide rushed into the Oval Office. Mr. President, a message from Khrushchev. Kennedy snatched the paper. His eyes raced over the words. For the first time in days, a flicker of hope. The Soviet leader was offering a deal. Remove your missiles from Turkey, and we will take ours from Cuba. No bombs, no war, just a way out. But then, the second letter. The next morning, another message arrived. This one was different, hard, cold, full of threats. The USSR will not back down. Kennedy's heart sank. Which Khrushchev is real, he wondered, the one who fears war or the one who demands victory? His advisors argued. Some wanted to attack, others begged for patience. But Kennedy, he saw something they didn't, a chance. the boldest decision. That night, Kennedy made his choice. He would ignore the second letter. He would answer the first one, the desperate one, and he would take a risk, a terrifying risk. He sent his brother, Robert Kennedy, to meet secretly with the Soviet ambassador. The message was simple. We will remove our missiles from Turkey, but you must never tell the world we backed down. A silent deal, a face-saving lie. Would Khrushchev accept? The longest night. Hours passed. Kennedy paced the Oval Office. Khrushchev stared at the Kremlin walls. In the Atlantic, ships still steamed toward the blockade. In Cuba, Soviet soldiers kept their fingers on the triggers. And then, the answer. A radio crackled to life in the White House. Moscow has agreed. Khrushchev's final message was clear. The missiles will leave Cuba. The war is over. Just like that, the world stepped back from the edge. Pride could have killed us all, but in the end, two men chose reason over rage. They whispered when the world expected screams. They bent so the world wouldn't break. Chapter 7. The Last Desperate Hours. October 28th, 1962. Dawn. The world had one last chance to avoid nuclear war. Kennedy's secret deal with Khrushchev was made. But in Cuba, Soviet missiles still stood ready, and time was running out. The clock strikes. In the White House Situation Room, red-eyed advisors hunched over maps. 12 hours, someone whispered. That was the deadline. If the Soviets didn't start removing the missiles by noon, the U.S. would invade Cuba. And if American soldiers landed on those beaches, nuclear war would begin. A spy plane's fateful flight. High above Cuba, a U-2 spy plane soared through thin, cold air. Its pilot, Major Rudolph Anderson, didn't know. He was flying into history. Below him, a Soviet commander gave the order. A missile roared upward. Boom! The U-2 exploded in flames. The first and only American casualty of the crisis. Now, the Pentagon raged. This means war. But Kennedy, he hesitated. One death or a million. The generals revolt. In a secret meeting, Air Force General Curtis LeMay slammed his fist on the table. Mr. President, we must strike now. Around him, generals nodded, but Kennedy's voice was ice. Number we wait. LeMay's face turned red. You're betraying America. Kennedy stood alone against his own military, one man against the tide of war. The message that never came. Noon approached. In Moscow, Khrushchev's cabinet argued. Hardliners shouted, "If we back down now, America will crush us." But Khrushchev thought of the U-2 pilot's death, of cities burning, and made his choice. He sent no letter. Instead, at 9 a.m. Washington time, Radio Moscow began broadcasting. The voice that saved the world. A translator rushed into the Oval Office, clutching a transcript. Kennedy read it aloud, voice shaking. The Soviet Union will dismantle its missiles in Cuba and return them to Russia. For 3 heartbeats. Silence. Then, Secretary Dean Rusk whispered the words that would echo through history. We're eyeball to eyeball, and I think the other fellow just blinked. The soldiers who never fired. In Cuba, Soviet crews wept as they dismantled the missiles. In Florida, American invasion forces stood down. And on a lonely atoll in the Pacific, a nuclear test bomb hung silently in its rack, unused. For 13 days, humanity held a gun to its own head. On the last day, at the last hour, we put it down. But ask yourself, next time, will we be so lucky? Chapter 8. A World Changed Forever. November 2nd, 1962. The Soviet ships turned away. The missiles were crated up. The blockade lifted. The crisis was over. But nothing would ever be the same again. The ghosts of war. In Havana, Fidel Castro raged. "We were ready to die," he shouted. But no one listened. In Moscow, Khrushchev sat alone. Some called him weak, others wise. And in Washington, Kennedy walked through the Rose Garden, his face lined with exhaustion. "We saved the world," an aide said. Kennedy just nodded, but his eyes told the truth. Did we? Or did we just delay the inevitable? The children of the bomb. In schools across America, children stopped practicing duck and cover. But at night, they still had nightmares. Bright flashes, burning skies. "Mommy, will the Russians bomb us tomorrow?" Parents had no answer, because everyone knew now the next crisis might not end so peacefully. The hotline. One good thing came from those 13 days, a direct phone line, from Washington to Moscow. No more waiting for letters, no more misunderstandings. Just a red phone, and 2 leaders who finally understood. When the world is at stake, you talk before you shoot. The soldiers who came home. On a quiet air base in Florida, the pilot kissed his baby girl. In a Soviet submarine, a captain hugged his wife after months at sea. And in Cuba, a young Soviet soldier packed his bags, his hands shaking. "I was ready to die for my country," he told his commander. The older man put a hand on his shoulder. Living for it is harder. The memorial that never was. Years later, people would ask, why is there no monument to the Cuban Missile Crisis? The answer was simple. How do you build a statue to something that didn't happen, to the war that never came? To the millions who didn't die, to the world that got a second chance. For 13 days in October, humanity stared into the abyss and stepped back. We learned that courage isn't just standing firm, it's also knowing when to bend, that true strength isn't in weapons, but in wisdom. And most of all, we learned that the most important victories aren't the ones you celebrate, but the disasters you avoid.